The Ray Hanania Show is brought to you by the U.S. Arab Radio Network and sponsored by Arab News Newspaper, the Middle East's leading English language publication, with print and online editions in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, France, Japan, Pakistan, England, and the United States. Listen to live radio every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern in Detroit, Washington, D.C., New York, and Ontario, Canada. Or watch the live broadcast on Facebook.com/Arab News. The Ray Hanania Show is rebroadcast in Chicago at 12 noon on Thursday. For more information on the radio stations, live Facebook broadcast, and podcasts, visit ArabNews.com. And now, here's your host, columnist and U.S. Special Correspondent for Arab News, Ray Hanania.
And good afternoon, everybody. This is Ray Hanania. It's Wednesday, June 15, 2022. And we are broadcasting live in Detroit on WNZK AM 690 and Washington, D.C. on WDMV AM 700. The show will be rebroadcast tomorrow on Thursday in Detroit again at 7 a.m. So you get the morning and the afternoon audience here out in Detroit, which is a big audience for us with a lot of American Arabs, Muslims, Chaldeans, a lot of Middle Eastern people out there. Nice diversity. And then it's rebroadcast again on Thursday in Chicago at 12 noon on WNWI AM 1080 AM radio. So you can always catch it there. And of course, we also broadcast, streaming broadcast on Facebook at the Arab News Facebook page at facebook.com/Arab News. And once the show is over, we distribute it all over the place. I got a great show this morning. And then in a few minutes, we'll have our first guest, Illinois Congresswoman Marie Newman, who is seeking re-election in the newly drawn 6th Congressional District. Axios, I read, calls her the third most active freshman member of the U.S. Congress. That's actually pretty good considering there are 435 members of Congress. She's the third most active freshman member of Congress, meaning of the new crop that came in, and a lot of them came in. She's really working hard. Segment 2, we are hoping to have, and I spoke to the staff earlier, Fahad Nazar. He's a spokesperson for the Saudi Arabian embassy. We're going to talk to him about Biden's upcoming trip to Saudi Arabia. Now, he's there already, so I'm a little concerned about making that connection with him. We want to make that connection. I'm hoping he's able to connect in, but it is the middle of the night over there, so it is rough doing the Middle East topics when we do this afternoon show here in the U.S. But our audience in the afternoon in the U.S. has really grown. We got a lot of people, and with the help of Layla El-Husseini, who is the publisher. I don't know what they call a radio person, the big cheese at the radio person, radio magnate or whatever. I'm not sure. But she launched the U.S. Arab Radio Network. She does her show in Detroit, in Michigan, Monday through Friday in the morning at 7 now a.m. Eastern and 8 a.m. Eastern. And they also do 5 p.m. slot out there. So it is growing. It's the only really, Arab American focused radio program that we have in the United States. There's some programs that only broadcast maybe a half hour, an hour, and they're great, but we don't have a strong enough voice. Just like our news media in the American Arab community is weak. A lot of that happened after September 11th. I know it's 20 years ago, but, we had over 100 newspapers publishing monthly, twice monthly. A couple of them were weekly. And then when September 11th happened, almost half of them were shut down because of the backlash. Even a lot of Pakistani and Indian newspapers, because a lot of Americans would see the different text. It looked Arabic, and they would assume it was Middle Eastern, and they protest and bully the stores that were distributing the papers. I know I had a newspaper back then called the Arab American View, and it just was, those 6 months after September 11th, was just really terrible. It was very difficult to put something together. So we try to build up a voice because communications, as you know, is the most important aspect of any ethnic community. I think the health of an ethnic community is a reflection of their news media, the ethnic news media that they have. And I know we're weak. And I think because we're weak in terms of having a ethnic American media in this country, I think it holds us back. So that's why I always give a plug to Layla, because she works hard to get the advertisers, to get the sponsors, to get to expand the program, to get people excited about the program, and to make sure that they listen, because we do a lot of promotion. One of the things that is coming up this week is the Arab American Anti-Discrimination Committee Convention that starts this weekend, Thursday night, Friday, and Saturday. They got a lot of great guests. And if things work out, we might be able to get one of the ADC spokespeople on, Jinan Shbat, to give us a preview. And I'll be covering some of that, some of the excitement over there. So as we wait for Marie to come on, she's going to be joining us. She did tell me that she was just running a little late. And, you know, it's hard not to understand that. She is running in a contested district. And this is campaign season. And we are 2 weeks away from the June 28th election. So it's not a problem. And we do appreciate her taking the time to join us. In fact, now we have Marie on the line. She's just getting set up. Hey, Congresswoman, how are you?
Good afternoon. I'm great.
It's so great to see you. It's really nice. Your staff has been very supportive. And I was just telling everybody that you were identified as the third most active freshman by Axios, you know, and that's a big deal because there are a lot of members of Congress that are often designated in a different way, the most absent. You know, we've had some of those before. But listen, let me just get right into it. You were elected 2 years ago in the 3rd district, and you did great. I mean, you had two candidates, the incumbent, who I think failed to kind of connect with the district, his own district. And you had another candidate who I thought was going to take votes from you. And despite that, you managed to really pull it off with a pretty sizable margin. What brought that change on? Why do you think you were able to unseat a congressman whose father, who I know personally, a great guy, by the way, I didn't really get along too well with the son, but the father was phenomenal. But they were in there for 28 years. How did you make that change?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, there was 3 other candidates. It was Congressman Lipinski, Rush Darwish, and then Charles Hughes. So the field was 4, and at one point it was 5 in the 2020 race.
And I didn't mean to brush Hughes off. He really didn't have. He's a good person, I guess. They're all good candidates, but his was tough. But unseating an incumbent is a big deal, especially from the same party. And having somebody that really carved into your base while you're trying to do that really made it a tough challenge, yet you overcame that. You know,
I think that I credit the district and the voters from the outset. In my first race, which, as you know, I lost by 2% in 2018, and my second race, the district and I were in alignment, and we were running the race together. So I think that's why it was so successful. I mean, I always tell everybody, it doesn't matter where you're on the political spectrum. You just have to reflect your district and be in alignment with your district. If you don't know your district inside and out, it's very challenging to appropriately represent them. I take that word representative ridiculously seriously. It's not just a word to me. It's what I live and breathe by. So when I say I'm going to represent you, it means every single person will be represented.
Now, you know, I've covered politics 45 years, and I tried when I got out of the news business, I ran just to see what it was like, and I didn't like it. Okay, you're in a fishbowl, and everybody's taking pot shots at you, and the focus is on the negative, the controversy. The good things you do are the ones that you have to work hard to get out, but the negative stuff flies left and right. True or not, it doesn't even matter. How do you even Did you ever think about, I'm not saying that you didn't want to be a congresswoman, but have you ever had a moment where you go, wow, this is a lot different than what I thought? It should be about fighting for, residents' needs and rights, and yet you're pushed sometimes to deal with issues that are ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, we have been very lucky. I have an amazing staff in DC in the district, and have amazing partners in the district. We, over the last couple of years have had 500 meet and greets, so that I continue to build relationships, understand at a very molecular level every issue. And as a result, I don't think there have been any, I'll tell you, the insurrection was a surprise. That wasn't on my bingo card, Ray. Wasn't thinking about an insurrection
right.
when I.
Right. Were you there, by the way, on January 6th? Tell us what happened. Because this is your first time on the radio, I wanted to do a little chit chat because I want people to see you, not just as a newsmaker and a politician, but as a normal person. But that January 6th, now I have a little different view. What happened was terrible. I think sometimes it's being exploited for political reasons. But tell me what happened with you. What did you see and what happened?
It was, we had been warned that there's going to be a significant protest and that maybe it wouldn't be the calmest of protests and that kind of thing. And we were told we had very specific security regimen that day. So I followed everything very strictly. And as you know, our business that day was to certify the election, right? And how that process works is each state gets certified individually. And so it's a very, I would say I even felt the weight of the job that day. Can you imagine the first thing you do is you certify an election? That's a really big, and while every other year that has been a very rote process and not a big deal in terms of the public, I felt the weight of it, and just being my first time in my first term. So, early in the day, we started that process doing state by state, and, a few states in, became clear that the protest outside was getting closer and closer. And then, in our offices, we have several TVs on, CNN and MSNBC, and then C-SPAN, right? And I remember after, I think like the third or fourth state, you've been there, Ray, you're walking through the tunnels, I'm walking back. And my, one of my staff and a couple Secret Service guys said, ma'am, we need to run. We need to get you back to you. And so I remember this big burly guy looking at me and said, ma'am, do you need to take off your shoes? And I said, I've been running in high heels for 30 years. I can do this. So we took off, got to my office, and my goal was to keep my very new staff. Remember, I didn't know a lot of them very well. It was the third day on the job, to keep everybody calm and focused on, what we were going to be doing over the next several months, and making sure, thank God there was a little bit of food in the office because we were in there for over 8 hours. But we did put furniture against the door because that was recommended. And hold up. And so we were watching, and
so you were inside.
Yeah, I was in my office. Wow. I was in Longworth. And then, news folks started calling me, and we didn't know really what we were getting a lot of information on our phones from leadership saying, don't talk to the press yet till we know what's going on, blah, blah. But, and then I could just see on the television that, wow, these people are climbing over banisters, and then when they got in to the Capitol, I was like, okay, I think this is serious. And then, my phone is going crazy, and my, everybody's texting me and emailing me and what have you. And I'm just telling everybody, oh, it's fine. It's not a big deal. They'll never get, close. Don't worry about it.
But as we saw, and they've charged 859 people with trespassing, about 350 of them with actual violence, destruction. I mean, some of those protesters were horrible, and I believe every one of them should be charged. That's not the way to do a protest. You want to protest, you're outside, and I assume that's how it, should have been. But let me just cut to the chase. Do you, and I know this is what the January 6th committee is looking at, do you think Donald Trump intentionally pushed them to that violence? Do you think that there's a strong enough case to make that argument? Or do you think, was it a reckless rhetoric that allowed their emotions to get carried away? Or do you think he never intended to do that? What do you think was his role?
If those are the three options, I think the first two are the most likely, that because he's such a reckless human being, so very reckless and out of tune and out of reality. I mean, he just is not in touch with reality. So I think that he didn't understand what his role was in the world or in that situation. We revere our peaceful transfer of power, and the fact that he was organizing something else is horrifying. Whether it was always his intent to support the Oath Keepers and these people. I mean, Ray, what we do know is that this was a highly organized event, and the Peacekeepers and all of these militia groups had practiced and organized and practiced military functionality, right? There were weapons buried everywhere. This was right. This was a domestic terrorism event. It was not a protest that went awry. We do know that this was domestic terrorism. There's just no other way to describe this.
That group that involved, I totally agree with you, that group, there were a lot of people that were outside protesting. They may have been angry, but they didn't seem to cross the line. And
yeah, I agree with that. I think there were some people that just felt very angry that the one that they voted for, and that is fine. Like, that's what our protests and our right is for, right? But it is not okay to organize a military style operation with groups that are skilled at that. I mean, that was just horrifying. And, so as the day progressed, there was no point at which, and I tend to process fear a couple of days after it happens, because I tend to just get really focused and keep everybody calm during the time. So I didn't really quite absorb what had happened till days later, when I found out the individual stories of my good friends that were laying on the floor of the chamber, calling their loved ones and saying goodbye. I mean, quite literally. So I processed it later.
The intensity of that violence really came across, I think, from some of the media reports. And just a final thought on this thing. Do you think the committee can really make the leap between connecting the violence to a criminal act by the president? I mean, the fact, and I'm separating the issue of his belief, even though everybody around him told him that it's not true, that he won the election and the votes were stolen. I view that in a way as that's his opinion. It may be stupid, it may be unjustified, it may or may not be, but that's an opinion. Does that opinion constitute an illegal act in the context of that violence, do you think?
Let me say two things. There may be evidence that supports he knew that he lost the election and articulated that. So if that evidence, in fact, comes through, then there is a clear violation of law. I mean, there's just no other way to kind of paint that. Now, remember, we have two processes going on at once. We have the congressional hearing process going through where they're investigating, and the DOJ is investigating as well. The DOJ is watching the congressional process and absorbing the evidence there so that they can continue on. So this congressional process is very functional in that it assists the DOJ process to bring it to the level where it is an investigation of a large magnitude, right? So this is a very fruitful time to present evidence to the DOJ.
Have you come to a decision yourself about, or are you waiting to just see what's brought out more? There's more hearings coming up, obviously.
Well, I think that once, there's a lot of evidence that's already been shown. If it is true that people were providing tours in weird places that people don't go on tours for, I mean, and it looks like that is true. And those people that were on those tours happened to be leaders in that violent domestic terrorism event, then my opinion is going to be pretty clear that these were domestic terrorists that were intent on hurting, killing, and stopping the election and taking over our democracy. There's no other way to interpret that.
we're really honored to have Congresswoman Marie Newman, who was elected 2 years ago in the 3rd Congressional District, unseating a dynasty almost over there. And then they redrew the map, and now she's running in the 6th District, this new district that they formed, which I think is a phenomenal district. But I wanted to bring you in because even in this new district, it still is one of the largest Arab American. It has the largest concentration, actually, of Palestinian Americans. Mm-hmm. And there's still a small part of the district. It's like about maybe 2 or 3%. But the fact that you're the first person to pay attention to them was significant to me. That is so important that you didn't ignore them and you spoke to their issues. Tell us a little bit about your approach to the Middle East.
Yeah, no, well, a couple things. Let me share a little bit about, so when in Illinois 3 proper, which is the current district, it's actually about 9.5% Arab, Muslim, South Asian Americans, primarily Arab Americans. So it's 9.5% of the district. That's a significant amount. Yeah. And my predecessors largely ignored them and didn't listen to their needs or their issues. But in the new district, the new Illinois 6, which is the open seat that I'm running in, that actually is between South Asian Muslims and Arab Muslim Americans. It is closer to 18%.
Wow.
It's 5 mosques. It is a very significant, and they vote in a very concentrated way. At the end of the day, the historical significance of this is that there had been several things going on, which was why I ran. Immigration is very important to Illinois 3, and it was largely ignored in every way prior to that. And it was really important that we pay attention to that and start addressing people's needs. And then, just economic issues and healthcare issues were not in alignment. Back to that whole issue of being in alignment with your district. And it doesn't matter. Like, if your district's conservative, then you should have a conservative representative. If you're centrist or whatever your political stripe is, you need to reflect, what the district is. And that was just a mismatch at the time. And so I think that's why I was elected. But at the end of the day, what was even controversial, Ray, 5 years ago, is not controversial now. I mean,
right.
The sentiment around Palestine and Israel has really gotten to be a much more realistic look at what the state of the situation is. Frequently, years ago, people would just say, Israel could do no wrong. And everybody wants Israel to be at peace and be prosperous. I can't think of really anybody that wants any wrong to come to Israel.
Right.
But when the government and the military mistreat the Palestinians, that is absolutely wrong, and I will not stand for it. And humanitarian rights are humanitarian rights. And this is not about religion or anything else. This is about treating humans correctly. And that's really where this all kind of is rooted in.
And, I'm writing columns all the time about the Middle East. And one of the things I always point out is that when I criticize Israel, I'm criticizing Israel's government.
Yeah.
It's funny that we could criticize the U.S. government without being painted in some ugly way.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you criticize Israel's government, some of the extremists come at you and they call you all kinds of names. Is this a big issue in this election for you?
So, Ray, I think my husband is Jewish, and I am called anti-Semitic on social media. Congress called me anti-Semitic. It is so upsetting to my husband and his family when that happens. And exactly what you just articulated is that I'm saying, hey, Israel, you cannot steal homes. You cannot disrupt people's lives. You cannot drag people out of their homes and take their homes away from them. No, that wouldn't be, first of all, it's incredibly immoral. But then secondly, you wouldn't allow that in France, and you wouldn't allow that in Canada. You wouldn't allow it in Korea. Why do we let Israel, and without speaking up?
Right.
So we criticize our ally, Israel, and say, wow, you have a huge humanitarian rights violation issue here. Huge.
And how do you navigate that Because you know why? I'm Palestinian. My wife is Jewish too, and it's amazing how people don't understand how you can have a view critical of a government, and then to be called anti-Semitic is terrible. It's just it's mind-boggling, and I think it's reprehensible when it's used that way. When there's real anti-Semitism out there because somebody's Jewish, that's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I've worked with the ADL. I've worked in civil rights for 30 years, and I've worked on anti-Semitic issues. For me to be called an anti-Semite now is infuriating and really hurtful to my husband. I mean, there are people in politics that refer to my husband as a fake Jew. I mean, it's horrible.
That's terrible. But I do know there's some members of the Arab community that are very rigid too. I mean, I'm Arab all my life, obviously, but so when they hear you or others say, "Oh, I support Israel's right to exist," and they don't listen to the part where you say, "But you got to exist with human rights. You got to exist within the law. You got to exist fairly, and you treat civilians and people with respect." They get upset with you. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think honestly, because I'm so close to the community, they understand now that that Israel should be free and be their own sovereign entity and be able to prosper and be their own nation. Israel has a right to exist now too, and I want both of them to live in peace. And I think they really understand that. I think that my ability to understand the complexity and the ever-changing nature of what's on the ground there is emblematic, and I think people now trust that I constantly seek information and counsel because it is an ever-changing situation. So, what we don't want is war. We're pro-peace and pro-justice, and I think the community really understands that is my goal. Is that we just want freedom for the Palestinians. With the occupation is bad for Israel and Palestine. By the way, it's a horrible thing for both of them. It's not a sustainable model moving forward. It's completely untenable.
What was your reaction when you heard about the killing of Shireen Abu Akleh? I had her brother on a couple weeks ago, and she's an American citizen. I mean, forget about the Middle East for a second, right? But what was your reaction? Because I was shocked at how many members of Congress didn't want to get into that because of the explosive nature of the politics.
So here's the thing, Ray. You should never, as a sitting member of Congress, you should never want your job more than doing right. You should do right. That should be your first sentiment and inclination, is to do the right thing. You shouldn't be worried about keeping your job. If you're constantly worried about keeping your job, this is not a public service is not the right place for you, because sometimes you have to do the right thing. And because a very powerful group doesn't like it, they can take you out. I mean, look, let's be clear. There are lots of powerful groups that want me out because I have been very clear on my opinions in India, Syria, Palestine and Israel, on the economy, on healthcare, like it goes on and on, right? I mean, there's no shortage of folks that want me to not have this job anymore, that are powerful people, right? So for me, you can't be afraid to do the right thing. The right thing is the right thing.
And I think there was a famous Chicago mayor who said good government was good politics. If you do the right thing, that's politics. That is a winning, strategy. How some people, when they look at the Trump administration and the Biden administration, they still see that the Democrats generally, maybe they're a little more lenient. They're a little more positive in their rhetoric. But outside of you and maybe about 25 other members of Congress, and I don't know, maybe it's more, it's still a small segment of the whole Congress and a small segment of the Democratic Party that is willing to have the courage the way you do to say these issues that need to be addressed.
Well, I think it has become a larger group. So I'll give you an example. A year and a half ago, I led a letter that identified the horrors going on in Sheikh Jarrah, right? And, I was told, well, Marie, you'll probably only get 9 members on it. And, I did this super crazy thing. I walked down the hallway and started talking to people and saying, please listen to me. And shared what was really happening. And you know what? People are good at their heart, right? They really are. Most people, 99% of people are really good. And once they really understood that issue, we got 26 people to sign on that letter that had never even thought about this issue before. So I think that that number is changing and growing, A, and B, remember, people, and this has been studied time and time again most recently, is that people under 45 have a very different opinion of the Israeli government than people over 45. And I've got news, those 45-year-olds get a year older every year. So I suggest everybody start looking at this with a real set of eyes instead of blinders.
And just one last question on the Middle East. What do you think is the solution? Are you optimistic about there being peace between Israelis and Palestinians?
Yeah.
Is it so bad that it needs more time? What do you think needs to happen? And can the administration do anything to push that along?
It's all about will, right? Like we could go in and start peace talks around, and it would take some finessing, right? It's because there are many members of Palestine's various areas that would have to be represented, because there's not just one government entity there. With regard to Israel, we would have to get them to the table, right? But here's what is most important is I'm never a fan of forcing what someone's governmental model should be. So whether they choose getting them together is convening the stakeholders is our job, the U.S.'s job. If they choose a one-state option, a two-state option, a federated model, a Belgian model, like whatever they choose, I'm okay with, because they chose it as a team. So let's let the people that live in the place decide. Let's not, I shouldn't be deciding for them, and the American government should not be deciding for them. But it is our job as the leader of the free world to bring them together and to have peace talks and help them get to a place where both can live freely, equally, and in justice.
Do you think the U.S., the government, the U.S. has the will to do that? Because I agree with you that I think that is the proper way to deal with this, not to impose something, but to create the environment where they can actually come together and in a peaceful way guarantee each other security and respect each other. Does the government have the will to do that, though, today? Our government?
Yeah, I wish the answer was yes, Ray. I just don't think it's there. I think that it's not a priority for them. And as much as I scream about it, Rashida screams about it, Ilhan, there's 10 of us that talk to the State Department regularly about this, and it is not been prioritized. But that doesn't. We fight, because every fight starts with one person, and then it grows to 10, and then it grows to 1,000. And, so we have to fight.
Now, and, I'll probably write a story about that aspect of it. So in fairness, I mean, you're not really attacking Biden, but you're just, when it comes to the Middle East, you're saying the will needs to be stronger. Is that correct?
Let's be very clear. This is additive. Has he done some great things with foreign policy? Is he handling Ukraine well? All of those things. But when it comes to Israel and Palestine, we are very conflict averse, because Israel is a close ally of ours, and it should remain a close ally of ours. But let's be clear. So this is additive. It's not critical. I'm saying now is the time to start addressing this issue. Add it to the top of your priority list. It's additive.
All right. That's very helpful. Let me shift to some of the Middle East dominated a lot of our topic, but and I appreciate your time, and I know that I'm cutting into a little bit longer than what I had hoped that you had been told.
I got on a few minutes late, so I owe you 4 minutes for sure.
All right. Well, you're very generous. I appreciate that. Tell me, what are the biggest issues in this new 6th district? What is it that people want? What do you hear them telling you, and what are you hoping to do about that?
Yeah, I think it's about everybody's rights. So you likely know, Ray, that I'm former Moms Demand Action spokesperson here in Illinois. I've been working in gun safety for 25 years at least, and have I've actually worked with Moms Demand. We've advocated. We've gotten 4 laws passed in Illinois. So I passed laws before I got to Congress, right? In the women's rights space, I've been doing that for easily 30 years. I helped bring reproductive care to the West Loop when there was none. I've been fighting for pay equity, economic issues for women, and on for 30 years. And I think more than anything else, people want their rights protected. Because remember, if Roe overturns, that, yes, that's horrifying. But what it does is it expunges women out of the economy and out of society, because if we can't have domain over our bodies, then we are losing our rights in many ways. Our right to be in leadership positions, our right to be in the economy, our right to be in Congress. Like, let's be clear, like, they're trying to expunge us from everywhere, and they being conservatives is who I'm saying they is. So I think the big deal in this race is people want a fighter, someone who really, and someone with the lived experience. I've lived in every part of the district. I've lived in, Beverly, Palos Park, LaGrange, Glenelg, Lombard, and Burr Ridge, right? I've lived everywhere. I know the district. I have the lived experience. I scrubbed tables and floors to get through college. I understand what it's like to go without health care. So everybody's rights. We need a fighter in the district. And then we also need someone who has that lived experience and understands it. But, there are a lot of issues. People want, to fight for universal health care. I have a background in universal health care. I worked on it for 20 years. So I think people want experience. And then finally, I think they want results. I've brought $300 million to this district, which is a historical record in a year and a half. And so, and solved a lot of problems on the ground. So it's, rights and, top issues like healthcare, bringing cost of living down, and making sure that you bring results to the district and convening people. I think our model of convening people to solve problems is greatly appreciated.
Any final thoughts at all, Marie? I mean, I again, it's very generous of you to come on the show. I think you've been very courageous in terms of addressing the issues that need to be addressed. It's not an easy thing. Not because people in the community don't support it, but because sometimes the media, I'm not trying to tell you that I don't want you to embrace what I believe. I think the media sometimes is very unfair when it comes to the Middle East, and they don't give us proper coverage. But is there anything else that you want voters to hear about you that you think is most important?
Yeah, I think it's most important that, we work together. I've said this since 2017 when I first ran, that what's most important is that you reflect the lived experience of the district, and you have the lived experience. I was born, raised, and have always lived here and have always worked in community service. And so I think you want someone that can bring those problem solve here, and then go pass laws that will solve the problem for the district as well as everybody in America. And I think it comes down to that, it being that simple. So I appreciate your work in the community, Ray, bringing these issues to light, because this is about education. And remember, you are helping your colleagues too. Your colleagues don't understand the issues in India and the Middle East, and some of these kind of economic issues around small business. I think that you're really good about shining a light on those things. So thank you for your community service.
Well, I didn't know you the first time you ran. I got to know you the second time you've run. I've really come to appreciate you this time far more than I did originally. The world changes, but you always leave the door open, because it's always surprising that people find out that someone that you thought was an enemy really isn't. It's just their alliances, friendships. But I think you're doing a great job. And we're going to look to see how things, turn out June 28th. We wish you the best for the Democratic primary. And I just want to thank you for coming on board.
Well, thank you very much, and have a great day, and tell your viewers thank you.
We'll do that. Well, they'll hear it. Okay. They'll hear it directly from you.
Okay.
Congresswoman Marie Newman, our guest. She's running in the 6th District in the June 28th Democratic primary. Thank you so much, Congresswoman.
You bet. Take care.
All right. We'll talk to you later. Bye-bye. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I'm hoping to have another guest who is going to join me to talk about Biden's trip to the Middle East, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. But I have another guest lined up, and I'm going to reach out to her right now. But let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I think we're going to kind of take a little preview of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee's convention that's going to take place this weekend. I'm Ray Hanania. We'll be right back right after these messages.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Imagine you're on a train track. Somewhere miles away, a train is headed your way. You can't see it yet, but it's coming. Slowly but surely. If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may be on the wrong track, and diabetes could be heading your way. Bit by bit, the danger is getting closer and closer. So should you stay on the track you're on now or move to make a change and reduce your risk? If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may qualify for the National Diabetes Prevention Program in your local community. This one-year program could be the ongoing support you need to put you on the right track. Not only did participants lose weight, they cut their risk of type 2 diabetes in half. Ready to get on board for a healthier future? Learn more about the National Diabetes Prevention Program and what else you can do to manage and prevent diabetes at michigan.gov/diabetes. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Live performances, concerts, music festivals, and hot jazz. Moments like these are made possible by the COVID-19 vaccine. So let's work together to continue to be safe and protect each other. Keep those concerts going. Keep the togetherness going by keeping yourself protected and your COVID-19 vaccines up to date. To find your vaccine and learn more, visit michigan.gov/COVID vaccine. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Are your hands feeling numb? Do you feel pain opening up a jar, turning a key? Are you noticing that your elbow and your shoulder are becoming stiff? Or were you recently injured in your arm? Hello, I'm Dr. Albajit Katranji, and at the Katranji Hand Center, which just recently opened down the street from the Somerset Mall, we can provide you with the latest in hand, wrist, elbow, and shoulder care. Visit us at www.katranjihandcenter.com to learn the latest techniques that we have to offer you, and I look forward to taking care of you.
Visit us in Troy at 1565 West Big Beaver Road, Building F, or call Katranji Hand Center for an appointment at 248-869-4263. That's 248-869-4263. Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bonham, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights. The Ray Hanania Show is brought to you by the U.S. Arab Radio Network and sponsored by Arab News Newspaper, the Middle East's leading English language publication, with print and online editions in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, France, Japan, Pakistan, England, and the United States. Listen to live radio every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern in Detroit, Washington, D.C., New York, and Ontario, Canada. Or watch the live broadcast on Facebook.com/Arab News. The Ray Hanania Show is rebroadcast in Chicago at 12 noon on Thursday. For more information on the radio stations, live Facebook broadcast, and podcasts, visit ArabNews.com. And now, here's your host, columnist and U.S. Special Correspondent for Arab News, Ray Hanania.
And welcome back to the program. I have a great guest on who was kind enough to join us. We had another guest that was going to talk about the Middle East, but we have this big event coming up this weekend. And I will say that I think the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee is the most important organization for Arab Americans in this country. And I'm biased because I was there when it was founded many years ago. So when they say I'm a veteran, you're really talking about old age. But I'm lucky to have Jinan Shbat on, who is the national organizer for ADC. Jinan, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, I love ADC, and I want to do whatever I can to help them. And I know you got a big conference coming up. First of all, give us a little overview about the conference, and then maybe if we have some time, tell us a little bit, if you can, about the situation facing Arab Americans in terms of discrimination. But tell us about this conference. What could conference goers expect when they attend?
Okay, great. So we are really excited because this is the first conference that we're doing in 2 years because of the pandemic. So we had to put all of our in-person events on hold. So we're really excited to welcome everyone back to Washington, D.C. this weekend. The ADC Convention is something that I remember going to when I was in college. So it's something I feel like is a rite of passage for a lot of Arab Americans. There's always wonderful panels with a lot of very, smart speakers. We have academics and we have a lot of professionals and activists who are coming to discuss a lot of subjects that are extremely important for our community today. It's all very relevant. And so we're kicking it off Friday with our opening reception, which is something that's just a little bit laid back, just getting everyone together who's coming in for the convention, enjoying good food, some good music, and just kind of hanging out. Saturday morning, we're kicking off with our first panel that's on social media censorship, which we know that has become a very big issue. It is focusing specifically on the censorship of people who post about Palestine, especially on Instagram and Facebook. We've seen in the last year specifically things like shadow banning, things of losing followers, and seeing posts taken down because they violate specific terms and conditions with no real explanation. And
right.
So we know that is something that's very important. So we have quite a few experts that are going to be speaking on that panel with us. And we all know that, free speech is protected under the First Amendment. And that's one of the things ADC is working on. That's one of the things that's part of our mission. It's very important for us that people are able to say and do anything that is protected under the Constitution. The next panel that we're going to be doing is more youth-centered. So we've seen an emergence of new youth activists. You were there when ADC started. I am also a veteran.
I like to think I was a youth at one time, but yeah, we're talking about I can't remember, was it 80 or 81?
Yes,
yeah, 1980. It was like, wow. All right.
Yeah. Well, I am no longer a youth. I may look like it, but age-wise, I am not. There is another generation now that is actually doing a lot of grassroots work, very different from the kind of activism that we've all done over the years. And so we're bringing them in to discuss not only how they are working on issues such as Palestine and other coalition issues such as Black Lives Matter, climate justice, but we're also going to talk about how intersectional activism is working for them and why it's important that we are now all working together on all of our issues versus just being centered on our own issue. And so that one, we have quite a few activists from the DMV area, one of them who is a chef and does the activism through their cooking and promoting their Palestinian food as a form of activism. So we're very excited for that. We're also doing a working lunch session on our legislative and policy updates. So we hired a new policy coordinator in the last year who has been working with the Hill and a lot of our offices on the Hill, a lot of your representatives and senators on issues that affect the Arab American community, things that are important to us, such as Palestine, but also other things such as like healthcare access, social justice, census representation, as well as minority business designation for Arab American businesses, which we all know Arabs are very big in business. My dad had his own businesses for over 30, 35 years. And that actually is going to lead into our panel after lunch, where we are going to talk about the economic impacts on Arab businesses, especially with inflation, especially with non-designation as a minority. How can we access the resources that the government gives out to minorities, right? Arab Americans are routinely left out of a lot of these programs because we are not considered our own category. We are considered white. And so we don't get any special access. So we're going to be discussing that. And our last panel of the day, which I believe is probably one of the most important ones, we're going to discuss the new Israeli COGAT guidelines for traveling to Palestine, specifically the West Bank. We know that they are implementing new policies starting in July. We have had so many people reach out to our organization asking us questions. We hosted a webinar about a month ago, but the information was very preliminary. We know a little bit more now, and so we are hoping to share that information with the community to give people a little bit of reassurance and update them on the news as we get it. So that is all the panels for the day. And then obviously at the end of the day, we are going to conclude with our gala, which we typically award Arab Americans in a lot of different fields for all of the work that they're doing. We're very excited. We have an amazing lineup of awardees like Leila Fadel, who works at NPR and is a journalist. We also have Dr. Jihan Bayoumi, who's in DC and works with underserved communities to give them access to healthcare. And we are presenting Amnesty International USA with the Voices of Courage Award for all of their work on the apartheid report that was released earlier this year. We've got an amazing lineup.
It's amazing to me that, and I think you have Father Atawahana also as one of the keynote speakers, I think.
So we were going to bring him, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. Yeah,
that's one of the sad parts about this deal with Israel's government. And I was just talking to the former, with Congresswoman Marie Newman. I said, when I criticize Israel, I don't criticize Jewish people. I criticize a government.
Exactly.
I can criticize my government. Nobody calls me bad names, but you criticize that government, and suddenly you're like the worst person in the world. How bad is it for Arabs in the United States? And ADC is so important because I know that you're the barometer. You manage and oversee what our situation is. Are things better? Is it an up and down, situation? What's our status today? How are things?
I will say that it's still pretty bad for Arab Americans. I mean, we have seen an influx in a lot of discrimination in academia specifically for a lot of students. We get students that reach out to us all the time who are being censored for speaking up for Palestine. We also are seeing a lot of people discriminated against at work. We have people who have been let go of their jobs, who have been reprimanded at work, simply just for speaking on Palestine. Obviously, immigration is still a very big issue for our community. Specifically, after the blast in Lebanon in 2020, we worked on temporary protected status for, Lebanese people who were coming to the United States. We're still working on temporary protected status for people from Yemen, people from Syria, Sudan. And so a lot of these things are still affecting our community, regardless of who is in office at the White House. It doesn't make a difference because these immigration policies take years to unravel once a policy has been put in place. And so our legal team is continuously working on asylum seekers, on visa lottery winners, and trying to get people here into safety. We still have a lot of people who, there's still the media portrayals of Arabs is really not that much better than when ADC was started. We know that was one of the big issues that ADC worked on back in the day, but we still see movies where they are still putting Arabs as the bad guys or making them look, the shifty ones, the ones who are causing the problems. And so even the news is not really relaying the information the way that they should be. And so that's something we continue to battle every single day.
Do you see a factor that kind of drives the fact that the discrimination today is really very similar to what I went through back in the 60s and 70s. I served during the Vietnam War. As soon as I got out, the FBI investigated me for 2 years because they said, "Oh, you wrote a letter to Time magazine, demanding Palestinian rights." It hasn't changed, has it? But what is it about it that doesn't allow? What's the obstacle that we're fighting, do you think, that's preventing this from getting better in a significant way?
Well, I think policies don't help us, right? There's policies that are in place that don't help us. But honestly, the biggest factor is the fact that Arabs are not considered a minority. So we've never been given protected status when it comes to that. And if you look at other communities like the Asian American community, the Latino community, the Black community, they have always had policies put in place to protect them. They've had affirmative action. Not to say that their rights are there and that they are experiencing a, problem-free life. They're not, obviously, right? But it's very hard for us to fight on behalf of our image if our image is seen federally as white, And so you can't push back on a lot of things because you're not seen as someone who needs that protection.
Yeah, every other minority group gets support from the government, but it's all driven through the identification in the U.S. Census.
Yes,
and I agree with you. I know there's a state rep in Illinois, Cyril Nichols, who introduced a legislation to recognize Arab Americans as a minority, so that they could qualify for the contracts. We pay our taxes. We don't get any of it back to build our own organizations, to help our groups. No money for culture, no money for all that stuff. It's almost like if they pretend you don't exist, they don't have to give you anything, and it makes it 100 times harder for us to fight for our rights.
Yes, absolutely. But I will say, though, that there are things that are changing, and organizations like ADC do have a purpose. It's not like we're just here and nothing's getting done.
No, you guys are phenomenal. You guys are phenomenal.
But it's changing, and social media is a big aspect of that. I mean, it's very hard to ignore things when you're seeing it in your face every single day. People have different sources of news. They're not just looking on the TV, and they're able to listen into things like this or other podcasts, and they're able to also follow certain, social media accounts and get the information that they need. And we are, like I said, moving towards a time now where we're working with other groups and other minorities on our issues, because a lot of the baseline foundations of the issues that we're dealing with are pretty much the same. And so we've noticed like a strength in numbers. And so we work with each other, we learn from each other. And I think that has been helping a lot. And, we have seen the needle shift a lot on Palestine. I mean, obviously, Congresswoman Newman is a huge ally, and I've heard her speak many times in DC, and she's absolutely wonderful. And it's nice that we have, Congress members now who are able to speak up on the Hill, because 5 years ago, we didn't have that.
We need a stronger media to help not only people like Marie Newman, but organizations like your own. Our network is weak, I think, and we need to build on it. Listen, I want to thank you, Jinan Shbat. She's the national organizer for the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. The website is adc.org, O-R-G.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So if people want to register, they can still register for the conference.
Absolutely. Yep. Registration will be open through tomorrow.
And it's this Friday. It's this Friday and Saturday.
Yes.
The big dinner is Saturday night.
Absolutely. Yep. You can also come just to the dinner as well if you'd like.
All right. And I'm not able to get there. This is one of the few times that I'm going to miss this, but I will be covering it. I give my regards to Samar Caliph and Abed Ayub and everybody over at ADC. You guys are a great bunch of people, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about what's coming up this weekend.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
Thank you, Jinan.
Thank you.
And I'm Ray Hanania, everybody. I want to thank everybody for listening to our radio show. It is rebroadcast in Detroit tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. on Thursday, and it's broadcast in Chicago at 12 noon, and we will distribute the streaming video of the program so that you can hear and listen to both our guests. Jinan, again, thank you so much, and everybody, thank you for listening. We will talk to you next Wednesday when we have another episode of the Ray Hanania Radio Show. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you.